to unfold on the grass at the All England Club is the second kind. Alex Eala vs Iga Świątek, third round of Wimbledon 2026. The defending champion against the 21-year-old from Quezon City, who has spent the last 3 weeks turning the grass court season into her personal highlight. If you've been following this story even loosely, you already feel the weight of it. If you're just catching up, buckle in because the context here is just as compelling as the match itself. Before we get to the tactical breakdown, before we talk about serve patterns, return positions, or who controls the baseline, you need to understand what Alex is carrying into this match and where she was just 48 hours ago. Her second round win over Maya Joint was not just a tennis result. It was a statement about who she is as a competitor, delivered on the biggest stage she has ever stood on. Joint was not a soft draw. She had just beaten Serena Williams in the first round. A returning legend the entire tennis world had been watching with a mixture of nostalgia and genuine curiosity. Joint stepped onto that court against Alex with momentum, confidence, and the kind of energy that comes from a major scalp. She won the first set 6-3. She broke in the opening game, dictated the pace early, and for a moment the match had a direction that did not look good for the Filipina. You could almost hear the narrative forming in real time. Too much pressure, too big a stage. The fairy tale ends here. But that is not what happened. What happened instead is that Alex reset.
She didn't panic.
She didn't force anything or try to do too much too quickly. She simply tightened her decision-making, reduced her errors, and started dictating the geometry of the court rather than reacting to Joint's patterns. By the second set, she was a completely different player, taking it 6-2 with a net game that completely disrupted Joint's rhythm, mixing in serve and volley combinations that Joint had no real answer for. And then the third set 6-0 bagel in a Wimbledon second-round match against a player who had just eliminated Serena Williams. That scoreline is extraordinary, and not just because of the numbers. It's extraordinary because of the psychological weight behind it. Last year in Eastbourne, on these same British grass courts, Joint beat Alex in a final that went all the way to 12-10 in a deciding tiebreak. Alex has spoken about how deeply that loss affected her, about how she couldn't even bring herself to watch the highlights for months afterwards. To come back a year later on a bigger stage and hand that same opponent a bagel in the deciding set is not luck or coincidence. That is the mark of a player who took a painful memory and turned it into fuel. There was another detail from that match worth mentioning because it says something about who Alex is beyond the tennis. She walked onto court wearing a custom Nike visor with a phrase written in Tagalog, roughly translated, "Once it grows, it cannot be stopped." She explained to the press that she carries parts of her culture onto the court intentionally, that every dream begins as a seed, and that this phrase represents her journey, her country, and the entire arc of what she is trying to build. That's not a marketing slogan. It's a genuine expression of how she thinks about herself and what she's doing out here. And that kind of internal clarity is not something that can be coached. You either have it or you don't. Right now, Alex has it in abundance. She brings all of that into this match. The Birmingham title, 3 top 10 wins in Berlin, 2 convincing victories at this Wimbledon, including a comeback from a set down, finished with a bagel to close it out. And now Iga Świątek, the defending champion. The woman who lifted this trophy 12 months ago without dropping a set in the final, winning it 6-0 in one of the most dominant Grand Slam final performances anyone had witnessed in years. So let's talk about Świątek, because understanding where she is right now is just as important as understanding where Alex is. This is a player who has redefined what dominance looks like in women's tennis over the past several years. Her clay court record alone is the stuff of legend. Multiple Roland Garros titles, winning streaks that stretched so long they stopped feeling real, a level of control that made the rest of the tour feel like they were competing for second place. And then she answered the doubts about grass by winning Wimbledon in 2025, shortening her backswing, adjusting her footwork, learning to stay low and drive the ball flat through the surface. She proved she was not a clay specialist. She was a complete player. But 2026 has told a very different story, and it is important to look at it honestly rather than defaulting to her reputation. She has 11 losses already this season with 0 titles and a 1-5 record against top 10 opponents. She lost to Rybakina at the Australian Open. She fell to Potapova twice, in Indian Wells and in Rome. Dragutin beat her in Stuttgart. She retired against Lynette in Madrid, which is always a complicated result to read, but not the kind of thing that happens to a player who is fully settled physically and mentally. And then Roland Garros, her home, the place where she has historically operated in an entirely different tier from everyone else. Kostuk beat her 7-5, 6-1 in the fourth round. That is not a narrow loss on a surface where she has had no historical weakness. That is a genuine upset by any reasonable measure. Her grass preparation at Bad Homburg didn't go well either. Emma Navarro beat her in 3 sets, meaning she arrived at Wimbledon without the kind of sharp, uninterrupted build-up that typically sets champions up for dominance. Her first-round match here told a complicated story. She beat Taylor Townsend 6-1, 2-6, 6-3, which means she dominated the opener, lost the thread completely in the second, and had to fight her way in the third. She cried during her post-match press conference. She spoke openly about the season being difficult, about things not unfolding as she had expected. For a player of her stature, that level of public vulnerability is significant. It tells you the pressure is no longer theoretical, it is real and present. Her second round win looked cleaner, 6-1, 6-3, but the opponent's level explained a large portion of that scoreline. The question heading into this match is not whether Świątek is dangerous. She is always dangerous. The question is which version of her shows up when the difficulty rises beyond what she has faced in the first 2 rounds. And Alex represents a significant step up from either of those opponents. Here is what makes this matchup genuinely different from any other third-round match at this Wimbledon. Alex has already beaten her. Not in a practice session, not in an exhibition, in a proper tour-level match in Miami 15 months ago. Ranked 140th in the world at the time, Alex defeated Świątek 6-2, 7-5. She didn't steal it in a moment of chaos. She controlled large portions of that match by standing inside the baseline, taking Świątek's second serve early, cutting off angles, and refusing to let the Polish player settle into her preferred rally length. It was a tactically precise performance from a player the tennis world had essentially dismissed as a nice story. Then, a month later in Madrid on clay, Świątek returned the favor with a clinical win of her own, showing she had studied what happened in Miami and made the right adjustments on a surface that heavily favor her game. The head-to-head sits at 1-1. Hard court to Alex, clay to Świątek, and now grass, a surface neither of them has ever played against each other on. That distinction sits at the heart of the tactical picture, because grass does not distribute its advantages evenly between these two players. Świątek's primary weapon has always been the topspin-heavy forehand that pushes opponents behind the baseline and takes time away from their preparation. On clay, that kick is enormous. The ball sits up high and heavy, forcing opponents to scramble from well behind the baseline. On grass, the effect is reduced. The ball stays lower through the bounce. The surface does not cooperate with heavy topspin the way clay does, and Świątek has to adapt by flattening her ball out more than she would naturally choose. That adjustment matters because it shifts the entire balance of her game. A flatter game requires her serve to function as a stabilizer, free points, short rallies, early control, because she cannot rely on baseline dominance in the same way she does on slower courts. Her serve this season has been inconsistent. Her first serve percentage has hovered around 63%, and across matches where she has faced genuine pressure in 2026, a pattern has emerged. She has been the player who breaks down when matches become tight and extended. 6 of her 11 losses this season have come in situations where she needed to close a decisive set or hold a lead in the final stages. That is not a random statistical fluctuation. That is a pattern, and it becomes directly relevant the moment Alex drags this match into a third set. Alex's game on this surface does almost the opposite of what Świątek does. She hits flat and through the court rather than over it. She takes the ball early, which on grass, where the ball arrives faster and lower than on clay or hard courts, requires exceptional timing that she has clearly been sharpening all season. Her left-handed serve is a genuine problem for right-handed opponents. The natural slice bends into the body and stays low after the bounce, stealing time from the returner and making it difficult to step into an aggressive return position. Świątek's return game is the best in women's tennis on most surfaces, but on grass, where the ball arrives quicker and the angles are more extreme, her opportunities to do what she normally does are fewer. Alex has also been coming forward more during this grass season than at any other point in her career. The serve and volley combinations against Joint were not accidental. They were deliberate tactical choices made because she understood they would disrupt her opponent's comfort, especially against a player who is at her most dangerous when rallies are controlled from the baseline. That net presence becomes a potentially major disruptive factor. Take away the baseline rhythm, and you take away the environment Świątek thrives in. That said, let's be completely honest here, because handing this match to Alex on paper would be just as wrong as dismissing her entirely. Świątek has won 6 Grand Slam titles. She has stood in the biggest moments this sport offers and found ways through them. Even in a difficult 2026, she has shown she can still raise her level when it matters. Before Kostyuk beat her at Roland Garros, she had beaten Osaka and Pavlyuchenkova to reach that stage. The inconsistency that has defined her season cuts both ways. She can fade at unexpected moments, but she can also suddenly find her absolute best tennis in the middle of a match that looks like it's slipping away. Alex, on the other hand, has never been this deep at a Grand Slam before. This third-round match is uncharted territory for her. There is no playbook for how a 21-year-old handles the psychological weight of facing the defending champion at Wimbledon on a show court with a stadium full of Filipino fans making a sound these courts have never heard before, while the entire tennis world watches, because the story is impossible to ignore. Pressure at this level is not theoretical. It is physical. It shows up in the hands. It tightens the grip. It changes the ball toss. It affects decision-making on balls that arrive in half a second. Świątek has navigated that kind of pressure and survived it repeatedly. Alex is experiencing it for the first time, doing so against one of the best players the sport has seen in the last decade. The crowd dimension is also not just a background detail, it is a real factor. The Filipino diaspora in the United Kingdom has been transforming Alex's matches throughout this tournament into something the All-England club is simply not accustomed to hosting. Wimbledon has a culture, quiet, measured, respectful, polite applause between points. What has been happening during Alex's matches is categorically different. Flags, chanting, a collective noise that builds through a rally and peaks at the winning shot. It creates a pressure cooker atmosphere that subtly but cumulatively disrupts an opponent's concentration over the course of a match. If Alex breaks early and gets the crowd fully engaged, the psychological environment for Świątek becomes meaningfully more difficult. Champions have been rattled by crowd energy before, and Świątek has shown this season that her mental equilibrium is not quite where it was at her absolute peak. There are specific moments in this match that will tell you very quickly which direction it's heading. The first is Alex's return position. In Miami, she stepped inside the baseline to attack Świątek's second serve, cutting off angles and compressing recovery time. If she does the same on grass, where the ball comes through even faster and the margin for timing is even smaller, it signals that her confidence and timing are exactly where they need to be. If she backs off the baseline instead, it suggests the occasion is pulling her toward caution. And caution against this opponent is rarely a winning strategy. The second indicator is Świątek's forehand depth in the opening games. When she is fully in rhythm on this surface, that forehand lands deep, just inside the baseline, and pins opponents back immediately. When something is off, it lands shorter. Against a player like Alex, who thrives on stepping in and taking time away, those shorter balls become invitations rather than weapons. The difference of 3 or 4 feet in landing depth is not a minor detail in this matchup. It is potentially the difference between Świątek dictating terms and Alex taking over rallies entirely. The third thing to watch is double faults and second serve performance under pressure if this goes to a third set. Świątek has been vulnerable on serve in tight moments throughout 2026. Alex will be hunting second serves aggressively from the very first return game, and if she can apply consistent pressure on service games, forcing even a small number of double faults at critical junctures, the scoreboard begins to shift in ways that compound over time. What all of this analysis ultimately points to is a match that is genuinely open in a way the rankings and seedings do not fully capture. Alex can win this. That is not an optimistic statement built on national pride or narrative convenience. It is grounded in specific, observable evidence. She has beaten Świątek in a competitive match before. She is in the form of her career at the exact moment Świątek is going through the most inconsistent season of her professional life. The surface amplifies Alex's strengths and reduces Świątek's most reliable weapon. And the psychological momentum, the Birmingham title, the Berlin wins, the bagel in the second round, is all flowing in one direction right now. None of that guarantees anything. But it means when that first ball is struck on grass at the All England Club, the story is genuinely unwritten. Watch every point. Tennis Unfiltered.